lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Everyone please rise, face the flag, and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. We're going to begin.
Thank you.
I'd like to begin by thanking all of the panelists for coming out, you, the members of the audience, for coming out and listening today. And I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge our elected officials coming here today. Council Representative Nelly Vielma, County Commissioner John Galo, Mayor of El Cenizo, Raul Reyes, LCC Board President, County Judge Mercurio Martinez, Webb County Judge Tano Tiarina, Mayor of Laredo, Pete Saenz, and President of Laredo Community College, Dr. Ricardo Solis. Now, we're here today to talk about basic questions about the museum forum, and we'd like to thank the Army National Guard, our Laredo sponsor, Our Laredo, the organization, for putting this together, and all of those that took the time, including the members of the National Guard Armory, for setting up and offering this space. Now, what I'd like to do is, next on the agenda is just open it up just for brief greetings and a few words from the Mayor of Laredo.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, it's an honor to be in the presence of veterans and the people that have served our country. Thank you for your service, all of you. Thank you. It makes me proud to be a mayor of a city where issues are discussed in this format, where people come together, where people actually come together and are able to discuss these issues. This issue in particular, as you know, has been ongoing now for some time, even before my time as mayor, but it culminated the last few months or so, and hopefully by the discussion, the input, and the questions received through the panelists, we can resolve this issue hopefully soon. I welcome this discussion, and the council will also proceed with something Monday and beyond, because ultimately we owe this service to our veterans. And frankly, the answer lies in you, veterans, to tell us, and of course the community, but more so, I weigh heavy my decision on what the veterans would want to do. So thank you, congratulations, y que siga viviendo nuestro Laredo, Texas. Gracias.
Webb County Judge Tiarina, would you like to?
Well, Happy New Year to everyone. Congratulations. This is obviously a very historic day for Webb County. I'm very proud to see what we're seeing. The last 3 years that I've been as a county judge, I've been hoping for something like this. So this to me is just really nice. It's eye candy. And I just hope and pray that, when we start speaking and talking and everybody understands one another, but more importantly, everybody understands we could agree to disagree and be able to talk and communicate. Como decía mi abuelito, si se habla, se entiende las cosas, mijito. And this is what it's all about. So congratulations to all for being here, and hopefully we can have a very good discussion. Thank you. God bless.
And Dr. Solis.
Señores y señoras, muy buenas noches. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for having me here. It's an honor to be part of this very important dialogue, which I know will affect the future of Laredo and especially of the veterans that deserve to have a place, a location to be able to teach, a place to be able to exhibit what the veterans, what they're all about throughout the history of the United States. And I'm here just in the capacity as the president of the college. Our mission, of course, is to empower people and students to succeed. And I know that all of you here, either yourself or a family member, most likely went to LCC to obtain an education. And I'm very proud to be part of that. And again, I look forward to this dialogue to continue discussing this very important matter for the city of Laredo. Thank you very much.
Once again, thank you all for being here. For the panelists, the forum was set up by our Laredo, and we've decided that the format will be, we're going to ask each of the panelists questions. We're not going to put a time limit on you, but since we have so many panelists, just try to be brief and try to respond to the questions. Dr. Kilborn, one of our moderators, and myself, Louis Labode, will be asking you some follow-up questions, and we just ask that you address your comments and those responses to us as the moderators. Excuse me. With that, if there's any questions, we're going to go ahead and start, and we're going to start with Mr. Kilborn. Doctor, go ahead.
I'm going to begin with the first question to Mr. Segovia of the Laredo Veterans Coalition. Your organization has been interested in this issue and has received a lot of press. Would you like to make a statement on the stand of the Laredo Veterans Coalition?
Yes, sir, I would. Is it hearable out there? Can you hear me? Okay, for the record, my name is Jesus, better known as Güero Segovia, and I am respectfully thanking you in advance for your time to listen to the latest report we have for you on the museum project. I'm here representing the Laredo Veterans Coalition. The coalition is composed of numerous veterans from all war eras, from World War II to the present. I am here on their behalf. We are approximately 90 members at the Laredo Veterans Coalition. We did consider, before selecting what we feel is the ideal location for a proposed Veterans Museum, we did consider the following options. First, the Farias home, and according to some city staff and a building inspector, it is proven that it is not a structurally sound building and would take millions of dollars to renovate and bring up to par. Second, we considered Laredo Community College. But from what I understand, the city nor the county can invest money in buildings or property that does not belong to them. And I also understand that LCC is not willing to invest any money in the building proposed to us. We also considered the old post office. People that were going to move into that building are no longer. The building is no longer accessible for whatever reason. North Central Park, although it is the ideal location for a museum, it is too far for our veterans who don't have the access or the proper transportation to be out there. Another location which we had considered 3, maybe 4 years ago, our group of veterans from the coalition, we had visited the old Air Force Base and were very interested in the property that is located directly next to the museum, north of the museum, north of the clinic. But back then they told us that this property was not available because there was going to be a federal building on that property that was being built and had already been sold to that particular entity. But we never knew that they only took up half of that property. The other half of that property is very suitable for a museum there because we can tie it in, connect it through a walkway to the VA clinic. We have done a lot of canvassing in the community, and I personally have gone to the VA clinic on several occasions, and I'll be very honest with you. I have a very soft heart for my senior veterans, and after hearing their comments, that it would be extremely hard for them, and some of them didn't even know where North Central Park is. So we, on the side of the Veterans Coalition, we had meetings amongst ourselves and took into consideration the well-being and to be fair with all the veterans of the community. So here we are today, and we are proud to announce that we have identified that ideal location, and that location is the land adjacent to the VA clinic, and it is a location where we can also build a small park for our veterans who wish to exercise and take a small walk within a small park area. The proposed idea is to build, since the space is not that big of an area, but yet enough area to build a museum, we have proposed the idea to build a two-story museum that would house not only the museum, but also a rec center to support social networking amongst veterans and a small park where they can walk around. I feel that since it is right next to the clinic, we can connect it to the clinic with a walkway where it would be feasible for all veterans who go to the clinic. And we have over 10,000 veterans in Webb County. Out of the 10,000 veterans in Webb County, we have approximately 6,640 veterans that visit our clinic for health care. Our decision, as I say, was based on the consideration of more elderly veterans than us, and we are old. So in summary, we are proposing the new location for the museum to be located right behind our VA clinic. Furthermore, we have had meetings, and a committee for the museum has been composed of the following veterans. Mr. Tomás Rodriguez, representing the Marine Corps League. Rolando Gonzalez, representing the National LULAC Veterans Affairs Committee. Rubén Contreras, representing disabled American veterans. Myself, representing the Laredo Veterans Coalition. Ernesto Sanchez, Korean War Veterans Organization. Roberto Lara, Veterans of Foreign Wars, and Miguel Castillo, Catholic War Veterans. So, in the past, people have posted on Facebook, Friends of North Central Park, and there are posts on Facebook that say that they are willing to work with us if we considered moving the museum from North Central Park to a different location. And they have mentioned in the past, and it is in Facebook, that they consider and agree that the base is the ideal location, especially if we can acquire the land which is directly behind the clinic. So, I don't personally know Mrs. Melissa Cigarroa. I don't know if she's here or not. Okay, Ms. Cigarroa, your husband is my doctor. So don't tell him. I invite Ms. Melissa Cigarroa to form a 5 or 6 non-member committee and join us in support and making this museum a reality. I have selected you, and amongst your friends, I know that you are very, very well known and very influential people in the community. Perhaps through your influence, we can get support from some local contractors, building materials donated, whereby our cost in the museum is lessened. I hope that you all can join us in this project. We also request that people with experience from the city or the county who are prepared to write grants, help us in presenting grants where we can have some funds to maintain and run this museum. And we are here to say to you that we accept your challenge that you posted on Facebook, that if we moved our museum to a different area, you would stand behind us and support us. We challenge you to that request. Now, I will say one thing, that before I came out here, well, this morning I called Councilman Charlie San Miguel, who has always been a tremendous supporter of the local veterans community here in Laredo. And he told me that whatever we decide to do, he is still 100% behind us. He said he will support us in whatever location we decide to move to. I also want to apologize to my veteran friends out here who took a lot of heat for me when a lot of postings were being done on Facebook. And also a very disrespectful article that came out on a newspaper where Charlie and I are on a horse, and by the way, we look really good. But I just want to say that you didn't hurt me. I'm a big boy and I can take a lot of heat, okay? But my family was hurt. My wife, my daughter, my son. My daughter is a 7th grade science teacher at Troutman Elementary School. My son, Dr. Jesus Segovia, he's a research scientist at UT Health Science Laboratories in San Antonio. Both of them called me and asked me, what's going on, Dad? I said, don't listen to it. I said, so I failed. I also didn't respond. But there were a lot of comments made that didn't hurt me. It hurt my family. And I hope that some of you people that commented against me, don't apologize to me. Apologize to my family. Thank you so much.
That wasn't me, I don't think. Thank you, Mr. Segovia. Now that we've heard that, Ms. Bazan, I think we wanted to hear from you as to the position of LULAC. My notes don't indicate that LULAC has taken any sort of position. Maybe now that you've heard Mr. Segovia, you can tell us what you all think about where the museum ought to be and what it ought to be.
Thank you very much. And thank you for allowing us the opportunity to sit on this panel. My name is Julie Bazan, and I am the president of the LULAC Veterans Council 777. I am a veterans advocate, and I am very passionate, and I care a lot about all the veterans in our community. Those of you that know me know the countless of hours that I've invested in different projects. The LULAC Veterans Council is a civil rights organization, and for those of you that might not be familiar with LULAC, it stands for the League of United Latin American Citizens. And we advocate for civil rights of individuals in the entire United States. Our council focuses primarily on the civil rights of our veterans, regardless of which era, age, gender, etc. We are here to advocate for their civil rights, but in addition to that, we have taken our council a step further. When our council was established in 2016, we decided wholeheartedly by its membership, which is composed of 90% veterans and 10% advocates, to ensure that all veterans in our community receive equal educational benefits, healthcare benefits, as well as the benefits that they so deserve for fighting for our country when they went away. Our veterans deserve to be advocated for. Our veterans deserve to be listened to. And as a community, we deserve and we owe them respect. We owe them the right and the privilege that they went and fought in many years across, overseas. Because of them, we are here today, and because of them, we have the right to voice our opinion. However, none of us have the right to disrespect any of them. So our LULAC Veterans Council has not taken an issue on this museum topic because, as I just mentioned to you earlier, we were formed for the veterans' civil rights. Our goal tonight is to become informed about the options. As a council, we will meet again and decide if we will take an issue. We were formed to fight for their civil rights. And I do again want to say thank you for allowing us the opportunity to be on this panel. And I really just want to emphasize to every citizen out there, please respect our veterans. Thank you.
Next up, Marine Corps League, Mark Peace.
Normally I don't need this. They say I talk too loud anyway. Basically what I'm saying is, what is the purpose of our museum? Is it for us, veterans, or like me, when you get over 80, you figure you're going to bye-bye land. So I think it's really for history. It's for the future. It's to educate the population as to what we did. So I think we very distinctly, the fact that it's at the Veterans Clinic is not that important. What's important is how can we make this into a living, feeling museum. I think one of the things we ought to think about is the area that's available. I just found out it's only about an acre available in this area we're talking about, that we just talked about. I think we need a lot more. I think we also need to figure out what is the most historical military place in town. And to me, that happens to be Fort McIntosh. I think we also have land there where we can put vehicles that might be donated to us in the future, so that people know what an Amtrak is, so they know what a tank is, so they know what a 6x truck is. These are things that you can get a hold of and donate it to the museum. I think that that also is, how do we, in fact, keep this museum going? What is it going to do? Okay, we all go and we donate our gadget. We get our uniforms, our helmets, maybe some kind of war museum things we have, and we donate them. But is that going to make that museum alive? The answer is no. We're going to have some of our stories recorded and saved, just like the Historical Society does right now. They record, both with video and regular, they restore stories that we all have that are going to die when we go. We need to put them in a place where the people that follow us can know that. So these are the things I think we need to look at and think about when we talk about a museum. Everything I hear right now is for us. But wait a minute, we're gone. By the time we finish building this thing and getting it going, we probably have lost 5 or 6 people in this room. And I'm saying, wait a minute, that's not the purpose of our museum. Our purpose of the museum is to educate our future people as to what we did to help this country be great. So I look at it as, I have no idea whether we can spend money in LCC or not. I've heard stories that LCC is willing to donate a building. I know that there's land there. I know that they have a whole bunch of buildings that are left over from when the Buffalo Soldiers were there. I know that's historical. I know it's a place where people would like to go and visit, and we could be added to it. I don't think we need a 2-story building, because that implies more money for elevators and so forth. Otherwise, people like myself are not going to get upstairs. And so think about what we want to do with this museum. Don't think about us. And so far, all I've heard is us. U.S. stands for United States. It should stand for what's going to happen in the future. And with that, my position is a personal one. I feel like the McIntosh area is better for the reasons I gave. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Peace. Thank you, Mr. Peace. To the rest of the panelists, Dr. Kilburn and I have learned that during our preparation for this forum, There's over a dozen veterans groups from all walks of the service, Marines, Air Force, Army, from all branches of military, from all conflicts. We've also learned that there's several possible locations where we could have a museum. Mr. Pease is correct. There's several different ideas about what the museum should be. Should it be a veterans museum? Should it be a military museum? Is it a meeting place and a gathering place for veterans? All those uses are uses that have been discussed. I want to ask the veteran groups, and I'm going to go next with the Disabled American Veterans, Mr. Contreras, what they think about what the museum should be in light of Mr. Peace's comments, and what we think the museum ought to be in terms of a vet museum, a military museum, a meeting place for veterans, a gathering place for veterans. Mr. Contreras?
I have a different view on how everything is being spoken about here. To us veterans, this is more than a museum. This will be a home for all of us, a home where we can honor our fallen heroes, where we can recognize all the men and women from Laredo who served this country. In this home, we hope to forever document and preserve the part of American war history as seen and told through the eyes and words of our very own veterans. In this home, the walls will be decorated with stories of courage, valor, sacrifice, commitment, and good old American values. In this home, everyone will be welcome, especially our loved ones. We hope to have lots of children there to educate so they can see in our walls what they see in the news, what they read about in their history and their civics books. Laredo veterans have stories to tell. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at a crossroads. There's only 20 to 22 World War II veterans that we can account for. Out of the 100 plus Korean War veterans, only about 15% of them are active. Our honor guard performed 81 funerals last year. These are 81 veterans who will never set foot in this new home, who will never tell their story, and that's a shame. We must stop this trend. You, the local governments and the community, can help us tell the story so that everyone can be educated. You can help us build our home. Help us build our home behind the VA clinic. God bless Texas. God bless the USA.
Thank you, Mr. Contreras. Thank you.
Roberto Lara of the VFW.
Yes,
Post
good evening. My name is Roberto Lara. I'm currently the commander for the VFW 9194, which has recently reinstated. So here we are. What it means is to be a veterans museum, just to interpret our veterans experience. And as speaking with my comrades, they expressed their feelings that it's better not to build the museum inside a park when we can build the park outside the museum. And like they have said before, I mean, it's just to interpret our experience that we had gone through. And in support of that, on behalf of my comrades, that's pretty much that's what they said and want. We have not really, in other words, we only met twice because our post has recently reinstated, so we're not very knowledgeable on what's really going on. We kind of got exposed to all this museum at the park and all that negative comments that have been going on. So the VFW is pretty much not well informed of what's really going on. So we really support the LCC or the next to the VA clinic. That's what I have to say right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lara. Just to summarize, Mr. Lara, so you're saying that you would support both the Air Base location and the LCC location, correct? That you're okay with either of those two, correct, Mr. Lara?
Excuse me, I'm sorry?
That you're okay with either the Air Base location or the LCC location?
The VA clinic or the LCC, Fort McIntosh.
Thank you, Mr. Lara. All right, we're going to pick up with the South Texas, Afghan, Iraq veterans, Mr. Gabriel Lopez. And if you could tell us, where you think it ought to be and what it ought to be.
Sure. Thank you very much, and thank you for putting this forum together. I think it's very helpful for everybody to understand what has transpired throughout the years. The South Texas Afghanistan Veterans Association is a nonprofit veterans organization registered with the government, and is a branch of the Congress-recognized veterans organization, IAVA, which is Iraq Afghanistan Veterans Association. We have 3 chapters, one in Brownsville, Laredo, and San Antonio. Our position has always been that we don't have a preference where the Veterans Museum is built, as long as the following conditions are met. The first one is that we must be respectful of the public. The museum must be educational in nature, and it must include a history of all wars and periods from all veterans to include peacetime veterans. However, we have to be mindful of how it will be funded and how it will be run. From past experience, having a veterans organization or a group of veterans organizations to maintain the museum, to do the operational maintenance and the operational day-to-day tasks of a museum, will not be a good idea to have veterans in charge. The Veterans Museum, as any other veteran across cities, the entire United States, must be run, maintained, and operated by a government entity, either a city government or county government. So, that is our position. However, I just want to go a little further and say that I have worked for this Veterans Museum for over 10 years. But I want to point out, since the issue was brought about, talk about being hurt, some veterans here today have colluded against me and my family, even during the death of my daughter, and has continued to dirty my name and to continue to trash me even as recently as last week. My daughter, who participated in many events at the American Legion, singing the national anthem. She was a true patriot, a daughter born on a military base from a military father who spent 20 years in the service. For those of you that are here, still here today, from those dark years, and who continue to trash my name and continue to collude against me and continue to raise falsehoods and half-truths and lies, I ask you that you go home tonight to your sons and daughters and you hug them and tell them that you love them. And when the museum gets built, you send them to the museum. Thank you very much.
Let me follow up with a couple questions. Let me follow up with a couple of questions, Mr. Lopez. Mr. Lopez, I obviously did a little research before I came. You indicated before that your group preferred the downtown location, what would be the old Farias house. Is that correct?
That is correct. The two locations at the downtown will be ideal, either the Laredo Community College or the Farias home.
Okay, why the Farias house? You heard somebody mention earlier that it was in a bad state of repair and would take maybe a bit of money to fix it up. We're going to get to Mr. Geisler in a minute, but
Well, that's a question that the county can best answer because they have neglected the Farias home for years. So I know many veterans have not seen the rendering, that the work that we did prior, many years ago. The rendering was done. The architects spend a lot of time, spend a lot of money, but because of egos, they decided to boycott the museum. But it was a rendering, and it showed the history, a timeline of veteran wars and veterans from Laredo who participated. Now, whether or not they like the name, they can change the name. That's up to them. There was a formal agreement, a formal contract written many years ago before I even came on board. But the ideal place will be at a downtown location where we can revitalize the downtown, where we can, there's a museum, there's 2 museums right within walking distance. So I think we need to look and we need to sit down with a cool head and let those architects that did the work present the work that they did prior. And let the name not influence your decision. But I'm willing to say that there was about over 40% of the work was done. So, yeah, the ideal location will be downtown, whether it be the Farias home or the Laredo Community College.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez.
Okay, thank you. Albert Hernandez, you're representing Laredo Community College. Several people have pointed that you may be one of the viable spots. Would you like to clarify what Laredo Community College may or may not be able to offer?
Yes, definitely. And first of all, I want to thank our Laredo and the public for being here, hosting this particular venue. And in the position that the college is in, it's a little bit different from other organizations. We're actually neutral in where the location should be, but do want to express the possibility if there is an existing group, an entity that would like to partner with the college, that opportunity is there. And in short, what I do want to share with the general public here is that we are open to considerations of any possible established organization willing to establish, operate, and maintain the museum on our campus grounds. Having said that, the college does have other organizations that reside on our campus grounds. So it is nothing new in what the college would be willing to do. However, the main thing that we do want to express is that the operation is going to be exclusively done by the organization that wishes to establish, maintain, and operate the museum, should they decide to approach the college to do so. Some of the things that are being offered to the general public and any of the organizations that are willing to take on this venture is there is a facility, this is the former guardhouse, that is available and has been extended for free of rent, okay? The college is not looking at making a donation of land or property. The college remains the exclusive owner of the facility, but any of the contents that are brought in, any of the artifacts or donations that are made will remain, the organization will be the custodial keeper of those entities. Some of the things that we do have to offer at the college in addition to the facility is that there is an abundance of parking made available there throughout campus. We have 24-hour security campus by our campus police. We have extended the use of the Memorial Chapel, the Veterans Memorial Chapel that is right next to that facility. We also have the use of the surrounding land, and I did hear some of the groups here that mentioned, being able to have some tanks, vehicles. There is land that is available there, and obviously further discussions will need to be held and further discussed in detail, but the use of the land is available there. We also offer to place signage around campus, identifying the location of the facility, and the college would commit to being able to maintain the external building and the necessary maintenance and the groundskeeping elements of that. However, again, the Veterans Museum would cover their own operational expenses and maintain the internal portion of the facility. So again, it would be an autonomous organization, an autonomous entity on our campus, but the facility would be something that is open for discussions should an organization want to approach the college with a proposal to establish a museum on our campus grounds. Thank you.
So just to clarify, what you're saying is that you're offering not necessarily a donation of land, but a rent-free location and willing to have any organization that wants to step up and operate this.
Establish, operate,
they
and
would be
maintain.
expected to cover the cost, but there would be the ability to offer parking, security, use of the chapel, surrounding land, and signage.
Yes, that is correct. And again, we'll also take care of the groundskeeping around the building. And the main thing here is in just having an organization that is willing to establish and set up the actual museum. The college is a place that may want to be considered, but again, the bulk of the work is being done by the actual organization that's willing to establish the actual museum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. We'll go ahead and Korean War vets, Ernesto Sanchez. If you can get the mic, sir.
Thank you. I promised my wife not to say more than 250 words like Lincoln did at Gettysburg Address. I want to thank you all for coming. We, the Korean War veterans, are still fighting a war. I'm the oldest Korean War veteran here in Laredo. I'm 89. We have been fighting for 15 years to have a museum. I was in charge of fixing the Farias Museum, and we spent a lot of money there. And it is not fitted to be a museum. But I tell you, it is a historical place, and we must preserve it. Downtown is going down. All the buildings are being torn down. And if you clear all the buildings, you can let the tourists go all the way and see the river. We must preserve downtown, but we may develop somewhere else. And we have gone through all the places. I once said I had a dream that one day your kids and my kids will have a museum so they can see what their parents and their grandparents and all those that have served. I lost a cousin in World War II. My wife lost a cousin in Vietnam, and some of you probably did. But we must stop fighting. It's been so long. Let's get together. Let's build this museum wherever you want. But the most appropriate place to build it is next to the VA clinic. It's not going to be 4 walls. It's going to be a live museum where all the veterans, after they have their blood taken out, they can go to the museum and have some get together, enjoy whatever they did in their life as a soldier or whatever. And I ask you, please, I am too old. I don't need this museum. By the time you build it, I'll be gone. And maybe some of you. So do it now. Don't let any more time go by. And this museum should have been built yesterday. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you. Next up, comments from American Legion Post 59, Cesar Montemayor.
Yes, thank you. I want to welcome everybody. American Legion Post 59 was chartered back in 1919. We are the oldest active veterans organization in Laredo. Right now, we're over 200 members locally, and nationwide, we're over 2.5 million. So, I mean, worldwide, because we have posts somewhere else in the world. But our post, normally we do a lot of community service, which is something that we always cater. We cater to the youth. We provide a program that's called Boy State and Girl State. We also provide a program that's oratorical contest. And yes, we would like to see a museum, and we would support wherever the veterans, the majority of the veterans want this museum. Next to me is my good buddy, Ruben Contreras, who's in charge of our honor guard. And like he said, we did over 80 some odd funerals this year. So, and like Mr. Sanchez said, let's get this thing going. So on that part, wherever the majority, that's where we stand, the American Legion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Montemayor. We'll go ahead and Richard Giesler, representing the Farias House Group. Mr. Giesler. Geisler. You've heard already some people talk about the Farias House in that some people think it's a suitable location. Some people say it needs a lot of work. You're very familiar with the property. What do you say about it?
I'd like to start out by saying the original Veterans Coalition were the ones that came up with the idea of buying the Farias home and turning it into a museum that honored Laredo veterans, not tanks, not helicopters, but the stories of our brothers and sisters. That house is ready to go. There's no such thing that it's not sound. We have architectural work is already done. That house was built in 1840, before Texas joined the Union, before the Civil War. That house stood 2.5 blocks from San Agustin. San Agustin's going to spend $10 million on the church. La Posada is going to spend a fortune on a convention center and have taken the Ortiz and the La Garza home to preserve it. Mr. Arturo Benavides did a wonderful thing by helping the American Legion restore their building on Zaragoza Street. Again, the Farias building is 2 blocks from there. The money's there. In fact, the money that everybody's looking at can only be used to fix the Farias building and create a museum. If we stop this infighting, if we just got it on, all they have to do is get the construction people to go in there. All the architectural work has been done. It's all ready. It passes this thing that is contaminated. We had a core sample of the soil. It's not contaminated. That the coalition moved out of the building because of mold. That's not true. We moved out because an agreement was made to turn it into a museum, and that's how it ended up at the junior college. The city's going to fix the 4 parks leading to Bridge 2, a block away from the museum. It's silly. If we gave it the go-ahead, in a year we would be cutting a ribbon. And hey, what's wrong with having 2 or 3 museums? We got one downtown where the tourist comes and all this activity and the It Street, Iturbide revitalization. I remind you the museum's on the corner of Iturbide and San Bernardo. Let's just do it. And yes, if we can get another one, why can't we have 2? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
American Legion Post 850, Hector Gutierrez.
No show.
Not here? Yes. Oh. Oh.
Where you down in
Hector Gutierrez.
My name is Hector Martinez. I am a Vietnam-era veteran, and I proudly served in the United States Air Force. Veterans United is a voluntary association of Laredo veterans. It is an ad hoc group created for the purpose. Okay. Okay, all right. It is an ad hoc group created for the purpose of fighting for a veteran museum at the base. Okay. Our main objective is to bring to light the total disregard of the accessibility issues the disabled veteran will have to face visiting a museum at an unfamiliar location while highlighting the benefits of having the museum constructed at a more centrally located site. Our proposal for a site at the base will address the issue of accessibility, as a large percentage of veterans, including the disabled, go to the clinic for medical appointments and are accustomed to this routine. We must consider that most disabled veterans are classified as homebound, and as such, going to the clinic will not present new challenges. The museum being constructed in front of their clinic will facilitate their attending and perhaps encourage them to participate in any museum program which will be part of the facility. We are concerned as well of spending money on restoring inadequate buildings at a cost equal or perhaps higher per square feet than that of a new construction. Hard-earned taxpayer dollars must be invested wisely, as any personal investment would be. Our group has secured what any businessman would consider a dream come true: prime real estate, and with it, the real estate's mantra: location, location, location. The number one rule in real estate, and often the most overlooked. The land offer was made at a meeting with city officials on September 27, 2017, a meeting our group secured as well. Out of the different groups being represented at this meeting, we were the only ones to accept this land at the base. The Laredo Air Force Base was no ordinary base. It was one of the best in the country, World War II, training pilots from 24 countries, as well as women pilots known as Noble Wasp. We are fairly new in this area and don't profess to know all the answers. What we do know is that the base site is the best choice, dollar for dollar. Thank you.
Thank you. And the Catholic Veterans Organization, Miguel Castillo.
Good evening. My name is Miguel Castillo. I am the commander for the Catholic War Veterans post-1908 here in Laredo, Texas. I'd like to talk a little bit about our mission. We are our national organization that was chartered by Congress and also by the Catholic Church. And it's a unique thing for a veteran to be a member of. Also, I would like to speak on the museum. As right now it's like a joystick. You don't know which way it's going to go or what. But I, as commander of the Catholic War Veterans, I concur with the comments that were spoken by Güero Segovia, and I would consider bringing it up to my membership about the base side and also LCC. But right now, I am in no, I cannot give you a decision directly right now, but it's, I will have one next week as soon as I have a meeting with our membership. So I want to thank you for inviting me to talk to you today about this, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. I think now we might get into some bit of a tougher questions. I'm going to go ahead and ask Mr. De Leon, our city manager, a couple questions. Mr. De Leon, it's my understanding that the city's comprehensive master plan contemplates a arts and entertainment district that would be in the downtown area. How would a museum at the Air Force Base or LCC or in another location comply with that sort of plan, comprehensive master plan of the city?
Good evening, Horacio De Leon, City Manager for the City of Laredo, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this panel. It basically is the entertainment and cultural district in the downtown is the preferred location for these type of uses. So having a museum outside of that district, not that it doesn't comply, but it's really not the designated area as, you know, the comprehensive plan calls for it. So, you know, it would be a good place to be able to have our museums. And so within that area, I would think that the Farias house would comply. But having it, you know, having a museum outside of the area is basically, again, it's a public preference.
Okay. You're aware that in 2010, the city and the county entered into an interlocal agreement where they already approved the location of the Farias house as the site for the museum and allocated, each county and city allocated $500,000 toward that structure. You're aware of that, correct?
There is a memorandum of understanding between the city and the county.
Yes. Okay. And you heard the comments about the Laredo Air Force Base. Wouldn't that land have to be purchased by any veterans group from the city, from the airport, essentially?
I was hearing of the site that's being considered, and I have a map of the site. I believe it's 1.9 acres. It is owned by the City of Laredo Airport, in which there's a covenant with the federal administration in which any use of the property needs to be paid fair market value, whether it be on a lease or a sale to the airport.
And with $1 million, do you think $1 million could go to purchase the land and build the appropriate structure and sustain this museum for a period of time? I mean, it sounds like it would be kind of expensive.
Is that a question or a comment?
It's both.
Okay. I respect. I believe there, you know, for any type of museum, there will be a need for additional money than the $1 million that has been committed by both the county and the city. So when we look at having to purchase land where previously that was not part of the plan, then the money would go definitely not very far.
Okay. And under the prior interlocal agreement that you had regarding the Farias house, isn't it true that the county and city agreed to split all the expenses of that facility 50-50?
I believe the memorandum of understanding speaks to that, but it also speaks to the $1 million, and so I would have to go back and look at the agreement.
Okay. Now, the city, you know, was always in favor of the Farias house going back to 2004. Funds were allocated in 2007 and 2010. That agreement was entered into. What has happened since then that it kind of fell off the radar and never got built? Why the sudden change? What was the reason for the sudden change?
Again, I can't speak for the council. My understanding is that in October of last year, 2017, there was a request by Council Member San Miguel to reconsider the site and ask staff to meet with the county and undo the memorandum of understanding and to move the MOU considering the site of the North Central Park. Now, when you ask the question about what happened between 2010 and 2017, I couldn't answer that. I believe the county was responsible for the project during that time. I believe you heard earlier where there was architects involved and design was undergone, so I couldn't speak to that.
But if the Farias House were chosen as the location, the city would still be willing to abide by its 2010 agreement with the county and pitch in and meet it with some of those expenses?
Well, again, if you look at the motion in October of 2017, and the motion basically says for the staff to go back and visit with the county and to undo the MOU, so that needs to take place first. And while that's taking place, we would have to agree to support, the project. And currently the project, as council sees it, is at North Central Park.
But there's been no new memorandum of understanding between the county and city for any other location than the Farias House, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. De Leon.
Mr. Grooms, Friends of North Central Park. So far in this panel, we've heard a lot about the VA clinic land, Fort McIntosh campus, and the Farias House. We haven't heard much support for North Central Park at this present. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, and once again, thank you for putting this together, and for everyone that attended, we thank you for your presence and your engagement with the community. Friends of North Central Park was a community group that was created by Alice McCain in the aftermath of the October 2nd, I believe, city council vote to put the museum or consider the museum at the park. And that's currently, whether there's a lot of support for it or not, that's currently the path that the city and city council are on. It's encouraging to hear that groups are retracting their support because we believe it's incompatible. Friends of North Central Park stance is that we want the museum to be built, we do not want it at the park. Like I said, it's a community action group of citizens from all over the city that want their voices to be heard. One of the major concerns with how the vote went was the fact that the citizens did not have an opportunity to voice their concerns. I myself am a veteran. I've been in 13 years. I'm currently serving. I've been in 3 different military branches. I'm also a resident of District 6, where the park is. And for full disclosure and transparency, I'm also a member of the VFW. We're encouraged that the focus has shifted away from North Central Park, but I want to stress the fact that currently, without a change in the city council vote, the city manager's office is going to be moving forward with plans to put that there. I think this panel has sent a clear message for the next city council meeting that we need to regroup and rescind the current order from the city council to the city manager's office so we don't spend any money or get too far down the road with a proposal that currently seems to have zero support. Going back to Mr. Segovia's challenge, I should say, we did agree that the Friends of North Central Park, we do support the museum, and at any other location, it's not our job to dictate a location. I think that, or we believe that it should be a community decision. Not everyone's going to agree, as we can see. There's a lot of disagreements here. The community's going to disagree, but we need to find what the general census between the community, the veterans, and what's practical given resources, and find out what that best decision is. And wherever that final decision is we will fully support it. How that will come needs to be seen, but we will fully support the building of the museum. Based on my knowledge of the process, we just talked about how the money was dedicated, but nothing was done. I think it's a disservice to the veterans, and I think that needs to be rectified. And Friends of North Central Park is more than willing to help that in any way that we can moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. We'll go with the Rio Grande International Study Center, Melissa Cigarroa.
Hello. Good evening. I'm a board member for the Rio Grande International Study Center, and I can tell you that RISC is very heartened by the comments tonight. We came here to express our support for the museum, but not at the site at North Central Park. It does seem, as Mr. Grooms indicated, that the support for that site has indeed disintegrated, but we do have that pesky issue that the council did vote to host it at the park. So we would hope and expect a council vote to rescind the October 2nd, 2017 vote to build the Veterans Museum at North Central Park. And that motion also included language to disintegrate the MOU between the Memorandum of Understanding between the city and county allocating funds. So I hope that when the vote can be rescinded, that those issues can be worked out and the proper language can be included just to protect the site at North Central Park. And I'll leave the language about the Memorandum of Understanding to the city and the county. RISC would also like to see the council vote on guidelines to protect green space from development led by special interest groups, which is how this entire issue came to light. And so we, as a group, are working on language to propose an ordinance that will set guidelines and a process for all future decisions on green space projects. As Mr. Grooms alluded, the reason why this has become such a contentious issue is because the original agenda item was very vague and the resulting vote didn't include the stakeholders of North Central Park. It is incumbent upon us to prevent this from happening again, to make sure that when it's such a community project of such magnitude, that stakeholders are all included at the outset. I think this forum has served its purpose to have an airing of all stakeholders' issues, and we just want to see the process be developed so that these forums occur before City Council takes these kinds of votes. And finally, I would be honored to serve on a committee to help see the development of plans for a new Veterans Museum. We hold no position on the site, as Mr. Grooms indicated, that is best left to the veterans groups to come up with a consensus. I have personal views on it, which I'll be happy to share at the committee, but I would be honored to serve. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Segura. I just want to remind the people in the audience that the sponsors have passed out little pieces of paper and pens so that if you have any questions, go ahead and bring those questions up, and we're going to try to get to them later in the program. So I just remind you that they're distributing out those little pieces of paper for questions. So if you guys have any questions, you can bring them up. Okay, I know you raised your hand, but we got one more to go. Let me just go with Webb County. Lalo Uribe, representing the county of Webb.
Myself or the judge?
No, you're up there.
2 mics.
You can have all the mics. Okay, so, we heard from Mr. De Leon about that memorandum of understanding that was entered in 2010. As far as I know, it has not been revoked. I know that the county has talked about passing the buck to the city and just, capping their investment at $500,000 and getting out of the whole mess. Is that still the position of the county at this point in time?
That I know of, yes. Excuse me, I'm a little under the weather. That I know of, yes, that is the position. Whether the Commissioners Court addresses it at a later date, that would be for the judge and the commissioners to decide, but as of now, that is correct.
Okay. Now, the Farias house that has been mentioned, is at this point in time owned by both the city and the county, correct?
That is correct.
And that memorandum of understanding was specifically as to the Farias house?
That is correct.
Okay. And the county and the city have not entered into any sort of other agreements regarding any other piece of property?
As of now, no, sir.
Okay. But if we could get the veterans to agree and the public agree on a specific site, you wouldn't have to get out of that agreement, would you?
Thankfully, I'm not one of the policymakers. They sit at other chairs. I'm the, as they say, the money guy, but I'm more than sure the county is willing to do whatever is needed to make this project happen, wherever the project may be.
Thank you, Mr. Uribe. I think we want to go back to Mr. Lopez. You raised your hand. I think you're the Stavia.
Yes, thank you. I just want to make a comment right quick because I think it's Miss Villarreal from the Rio Grande.
Ms. Cigarroa.
Miss
Cigarroa.
Cigarroa, I'm sorry, I apologize, ma'am. I want to go back to her and I want to thank her for her willingness to join the proposed committee that the Laredo Veterans Coalition has again proposed. But then again, I want to point out that here we have another purposeful and blatant intent to disregard the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans Association, because if you notice, that organization was not named in the community. Now, I would like to think that that was just an omission of error. However, from past experience, I think that is not the case. So, for the record, I would like to point out that the Iraq and Afghanistan South Texas Veterans Association was not entered as a committee member. So, we can clarify that. I'd be more than happy.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez.
There was a committee that Mr. Segovia proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez.
Okay. So far, we've had questions about some of the funding sites and the funding for the locations. I was wondering if any of the panelists here, and you can just raise your hand on this, do any of you have a preliminary budget laid out for the scope of the project? Because one of the questions we want to know is what kind of money are we talking to really build the program and operate it for a certain amount of time? Does anybody have a preliminary budget, or would that be developed through a committee? Okay. That seems to be one of the tasks that we'd have to do, is get to a budget to understand the nature of the size and scope of the nature of the project. It seems like we're certainly still in the discussions about location, if we can agree upon that we have some of the discussions about location and some of this questions about what the budget will be right now. Yes, Richard.
On the Farias home, it's our understanding from the architect in Austin, Mr. Kennedy, that had to be hired because that building is a historic building. So before you can do anything to it, you have to use an architect that's certified by and he has told us that $1 million would fix the building and also set it up for display, and then that would be it. And then we would probably have to raise another $200,000, $300,000.
Thank you, Richard. Mr. Segovia, there's a question directed to you. You've been talking about the airport site next to the VA clinic. Do you have an estimate of what the cost would be to create the museum on that property?
I contacted one of the architects that has been working on the North Central Park project. I will be taking him out to that property at the base and show him exactly what our intentions are there and try to minimize the cost as much as possible so that we have funds left over to accommodate, what I mentioned earlier. He will be going with me out there Friday morning and propose or a guesstimate as to an idea as to how much it would cost, for what we request.
Mm-hmm. Now, you heard Mr. De Leon say that property also needs to be purchased from the airport before you can even get going. Have you?
My idea is to get together with the city and see if they can negotiate a price, let us know the price, and from there we can make other arrangements.
Thank you, Mr. Segovia.
This is a question for Mr. De Leon of the city, and it comes from Rolando Gonzalez. He says, my source tells me that federal government is only concerned with the airport, the hangars, and runways, so everything west of Maher is in city property. Is this true or not?
Good question, and perception would tell you that, but if we remind ourselves, this was the Air Force Base, and the whole Air Force Base footprint was what was conveyed to the city back in 1976. And so non-aeronautical property is used for lease and for sale to be able to operate the airport. And so this is why we have that, there's that covenant. And so previous properties that have been used, even current properties that are being used currently by the city, pay a lease to the airport.
Thank you, Mr. De Leon.
Nope.
Excuse us.
We can address questions about this after, if you have a question about that, until we're just taking questions from the audience here on the paper.
Thank you, sir. We have a question from Barry to both county and city. The question is, after looking at building the building and maintaining it, which entity of all these entities will be able to maintain that building for the long term, if you all know? That's directed at County, Lalo, and Mr. De Leon. Which entity would be able to maintain that museum for the long term if it weren't the city and county?
Well, I could add to that by some of the experiences that we've had as we looked at the feasibility of developing the old federal courthouse into a museum. The city hired a consultant that specializes in looking at how you develop a museum, and so it would require the establishing a foundation, and that those board members of the foundation would help raise money to be able to not only operate the museum but also bring in different exhibits. So the recommendation would be that yes, either municipal government or county government oversee and have underwrite the project, but there needs to be a foundation that would help raise the money to operate.
Thank you, Mr. Leon.
This is a question for Mr. Hernandez of Laredo Community College. He said, didn't LCC and the city fail to come into agreement on the use of the sports fields of the South Campus? So how can we assure that the public, that it can work together with the city?
At this point, they do not have any information as far as that particular agreement, so I cannot answer at this point.
Somebody pointed out that was TAMIU. Okay.
There's a question here for Richard from Roberto. The question is whether the Farias building could be remodeled and used for, as example, as an administrative building or some kind of building related to the vets, while a museum be located somewhere else, maybe at the Air Force Base or at LCC. Mike.
The original, to go back a little bit, the original Veterans Coalition, when it was formed, we used that building. And it's one of the most historical buildings, and I'm in agreement. Like several people have said, I can think of a half a dozen fellows that were supportive of the museum that we buried. And there is the money's there, the architectural renditions are done. We could be cutting the ribbon on a museum in a year and at least have a place to honor the veterans. Now, if these other plans come through and the millions and millions of dollars needed to do that, like I said, why not? We can have two museums. What a walking tour from the junior college to San Agustin and the museum. It would be a stroll down historic Laredo.
Thank you, Rich.
For Mr. De Leon of the city, who will make the final decision on the location of the museum?
Definitely, I think the question merits, the final location would be up to the veterans, which would require that they plead to the city council and the county as to where they would like the museum. Currently, I can only speak to what the council's action has been, and that is right now at North Central Park.
What was that, Mr. Leon?
I said, I could only speak about what has already been approved by council. I said, but I would think that, after today, if there is an item on the agenda at council to change that site and council changes the motion, then that would be the site select.
Thank you, Mr. Leon.
This is a question for the county. Have and would you consider 801 or 802 Grant, the buildings, which are downtown and catty corner to the Heritage House and the American Legion? They're not historic, so they cannot be removed.
I don't know that the county, and again, this may be a question for the judge or Commissioner Galo, but I don't think the county is going to stop or impede the progress of any Veterans Museum anywhere. Commissioners Court voted to dissolve the current MOU that we do have and follow the lead of any of the veterans groups in general to decide on a location, wherever the location may be, whether it's at North Central Park, Laredo Community College, or the Farias building, or any other building that may come up after that. I don't know that Commissioners Court and or City Council is in any position to want to suggest or even dictate where a location may be, other than just support the location wherever it is decided on. The monies are still there, $500,000 on behalf of the county, and Commissioners Court voted to direct those funds to where the Veterans Coalition, their commanders, so choose.
Thank you, Lalo. I have a hard-to-read question, but it's submitted by Javier Santos, who I didn't see here. But he asks, what happened to the plan that a councilman asked that the Fernando Salinas house on the east side of Iturbide be contributed for the museum as a gift to the city? I'm not aware of that, but apparently the Fernando A. Salinas Trust has offered the house on the east side of Iturbide for free as a museum. Has anybody, that was directed to Lalo, I guess, but Richard, go ahead.
When the architectural plans were done, Mr. Salinas said that if the Farias house was turned into a museum, that he would donate what we call the Chito Salinas home. And in the architectural renditions done by Mr. Kennedy, the architect in Austin, that's included, restored, and between that building and the museum, the Farias home, would be a walkway of brick with the names of veterans in the bricks. But then demolition by neglect has been happening, and so those plans, like the other plans, just came to a halt.
Thank you, Richard.
This is a question for the city and the county. Did the city and county dissolve the MOI, and was it a legally binding, valid action?
As of today, and Mr. De Leon can correct me if I'm wrong, the current MOU still stands. I believe City Council, and I'll let Mr. De Leon speak, but I know that Commissioners Court did vote to get with the city so that we could undo or dissolve the current MOU and enter into a new one that would be suitable for a new location or any other location. But I'll let Mr. De Leon speak.
That is correct. I mean, I agree with those statements.
Thank you, Mr. Leon. We have a question for, again, Lalo and Mr. De Leon. The question is, can the city and/or the county pay for improvements at a site like LCC?
For the city, the funding that has been set aside for the MOU is bond money. And bond money cannot be used in any property that is not city-owned or a long-term lease. So the question, can it be used at the LCC site? There would have to be either a long-term lease or the property would have to be conveyed to the city and able to use the bond money.
I think there was mention of if there were money invested in that old farm, the guardhouse, that there would be the possibility of doing a long-term lease. Would that be okay?
With regards to the use of the funding that has been appropriated, yes.
Thank you, Mr. De Leon.
This was a question for Mr. Segovia. And it stated, recently the city of Laredo offered a TERS to develop land, approximately $34 million. Can you advocate with the city council to request that the landowner include a museum?
Sir, I did not hear that question right.
Okay. This was a question that stated that recently the city of Laredo offered a TERS.
Offered a what?
Tax increment reinvestment zone.
Tax increment reinvestment zone to develop his land of approximately $34 million. Can you convince the city council to request the landowner to develop the museum?
I don't understand the question.
Can't hear over here.
Can you bring it over here?
I'm trying to be faithful to the way it was written, and I don't want to get into too much interpretation of the way it was written.
I think the question was meant to say that because of recent offerings by the city of giving people TERSs, is there a possibility that the Veterans Associations can convince the city or a landowner to include a museum as part of a new TERS? And I think that would be more a question directed to Mr. De Leon or...
Well, let me address that. There is a downtown tax increment reinvestment zone that was approved by council in which the board has been named. The board has passed a finance plan and a project plan, and the idea is to improve downtown. If the question is geared towards would a museum in the downtown area, and again, the Farias house would be something that would be eligible to be able to use the funding that is projected in the downtown TERS.
So that would be available for the Farias house?
That could be if approved by the board of the TERS.
Thank you, Mr. De Leon.
This is for LCC and the city. Is the city and LCC willing to work hand in hand in building the museum for a more cost-effective approach?
Again, on the information conveyed from Laredo Community College, the commitment made by the college is to offer rent-free the facility to an established organization, whether it be a foundation or any other organization willing to set up, maintain, and operate the facility. At that point, as far as any monetary contributions, that is the extent of the commitment made by the college, other than maintaining the external portions of the building and the surrounding grounds, the groundskeeping.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez.
Do we have any more questions from the audience here to turn in? Well, I think we've done a pretty amazing job getting this done before schedule.
We got just looks like a couple more questions from the audience. Now that this is the question, it's sort of a statement. It seems that the panelists have all kind of had their say, and after the question and answer, the consideration is that the favorable sites have been whittled down to the Laredo Community College, the Air Force Base, and the Farias House. Is there a consensus of the panelists to rescind the motion selecting North Central Park at the next City Council meeting? Is there an agreement by the panelists to rescind that motion selecting North Central Park as the place for the Veterans Museum?
I think before we make that kind of decision or appoint or express that, we need to realize what we want out of the museum. As I stated when I talked, what do we want? Do we want it something for us, or do we want it something for the future? Once we do that, it makes a big difference where the location is.
I'd like to say something, sir. I tend to disagree with Mr. Mark. The majority of the veterans which I have had comments with or how can I say it, meetings with, they want a museum now and they want it for us, okay? We want it where we can store our memorabilia, where we can take our grandkids, where we can take our friends, family, so they can see what we went through in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, World War II, Korea. We want to place our memorabilia and be able to see it on display. As far as the future is concerned, it will be there for the future, okay? But my understanding is that the consensus of the veteran community want the museum now, and I especially want it for the Korean War veterans and the remaining World War II veterans. For them, while they are still alive, and most of us are reaching that age. So my consensus is, and I hate to disagree about the future because the future will come anyway. And we want to see our memorabilia at this time at a museum, and hopefully we will rescind North Central Park on the condition, or I don't want to put conditions, but that we are supported for the land right next to the VA clinic, which will make it very accessible to every veteran that visits that clinic, and will have the opportunity to visit the museum as many times as they want to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Segovia. Mr. Segovia, let me ask you a follow-up question. Mr. Segovia. Based on what you just said, you're indicating that the museum you would like to see is a veterans museum dedicated to the veterans, not necessarily a military museum, correct?
At this time, since the land is limited, we will settle for a veterans museum.
Thank you, Mr. Segovia.
Okay.
I guess I got to respond. You know, I always don't want to, but I got to just talk.
Quickly.
I am not against what just was said there. I know that we as veterans want to see our stuff there. But the problem is not that. The problem, as I said before, we're getting up in years. And what are we going to do what are we doing for the future? And I think this museum should have a purpose, more than just us looking at what we saw when we were fighting, or those who were veterans who didn't fight saw what the other veterans did were fighting. That's great, I'm not against it. But I think we need to figure out what the purpose of this is for the future. Are we going to show future generations what we did, what we went through, what we gave them, how we protected them, how we gave our lives, our blood? That to me is very important for the future generations of the United States. So when I look at this museum, I agree with everything that was just said. We want it now. I don't disagree with that. We want to look at our memorabilia. I agree with that. But I want a purpose for that. And when you put a purpose in, now you have to have a different location, because you need more than 1 acre of land. 1 acre of land with the amount of money we're trying to put in to build this building, we won't have the elevators we need. We won't have to be able to get up to the second deck. So yes, the Iraq veterans will be up there. They can go to the second deck. But when you get to be 80 like me, maybe you can't grow up those stairs. So I want it on one level. And I want more space. I'd love to see the tanks and the Amtraks and these vehicles somewhere in that neighborhood, so we can show the people, look, this is what your granddad, who's dead now, this is what he fought in. This is what he landed on the shores of Busan, you know, or Iwo Jima, or in my case, Chulai. Okay, these are the things that you want to be able to show. I guess that's what, I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Mr. Peace. Mr. Peace, if I could follow up. So you would envision the museum being not only commemorating the veterans, but also a military museum, Mr. Peace? You would see it as that? Did you hear me, Mr. Peace? You didn't hear me?
I think what he's trying to say is that the purpose has to be somewhat educational.
Yes.
Thank you.
We have a final question from the audience from LC. How big is the building, and how much do you think it will take to get the site at LCC ready?
I need to get the actual dimensions of the facility, but it would entail for a group that would be interested to actually visit the facility and do a needs assessment of that particular building and determine what the actual use is going to be determined for what the use is going to be, in order to determine what the actual figures are going to be in order to bring that up to par based on the expectations of that particular entity. So until we have an actual group that approaches the college and is committed to do a proposal and invest the time to be able to determine what that facility will look like, that answer would be able to come at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Mr. Hernandez, I happened to go out to the college and look at these buildings. The building you were asked about was what's called the guardhouse, correct?
That is correct.
Isn't there another larger building that also has not been renovated, that could be renovated, that is much larger than the guardhouse?
At this point, the information that has been previewed to me is the use of the guardhouse. I do not have any additional information on any other facility on campus that has been extended to be used as a possible Veterans Museum.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Mr. Segovia.
Yes, sir. I understand that the square footage for the old guardhouse is 1,290 something square feet. And there was a proposal or a guesstimate on the renovation at $240 a square foot to renovate that building. It was coming in excess of $225,000, $250,000 to renovate a 1,290 something square feet building. And then again, one of the biggest problems is, I am not against LCC, but the biggest problem is this: during school time, it's a hassle to get back there to that guardhouse. just getting to the Laredo Veterans Coalition office takes you about 10, 15 minutes. By the time you go to the first stop sign, go to the next stop sign, let the students cross over and wait. I mean, it's really a hassle to have a museum out there, and I do think that it will not be visited by any amount of veterans. Perhaps only the ones that live in the area, but the general veterans community will never go out there, trust me.
Thank you, Mr. Segovia.
Well, I'd like to close by thanking all of the panelists for giving their time and sharing and leaving everything open to us. And I look forward to seeing the work that comes through in the future. I certainly want to thank our Laredo for sponsoring this event, the people for showing up, and we look forward to a swift resolution, development of this.